Welcome to Insubstantia. I'm Gabor Farkas. This is part 2 of my conversation with Arthur Keller. In the first part, we stayed with the systemic dimension of the crisis we face and with the limits of the institutions that are supposed to respond to them. We talked about how information rarely leads to action and how fragmented expertise prevents us from seeing the whole picture. The second part opens with a broader question. If our systems struggle with risks that cut across every category we use, what does that say about our ability to imagine anything beyond the present? So I return to a thread we touched on earlier. In my conversation on the podcast with Dan Davies, who wrote The Unaccountability Machine, we spoke about how systems often avoid real accountability. Your work, Arthur, points to something deeper. It suggests that we also lack the imagination and the cultural tools we would need to respond. That is where I would like to go next. You often say that we need to imagine futures before we can build them. Why do you think imagination has become such a scarce resource in politics and in governance today?
As I say, they can act within the system. They can also imagine things within the system, and that's it. That's the extent of their power. They have power, but in that system. And what we need is specifically completely different. It's outside. I'm not saying that to make change happen, people need to visualize another system. It's not as simple as that. It's not about saying what society could look like. It's important, right? But it's not the main thing to me. To me is not just about projecting another society. It's projecting oneself into that alternative reality. People need to project themselves, need to envision who they could be tomorrow, what they could do tomorrow that maybe they can't do, they don't know how to do, they don't have the liberty to do today. And that's what makes the difference. It's empowering to start, you know, setting the foundations for a new system. I'm just saying setting the foundations because I'm not saying building a new system. Nobody, no community can build a new system. You can build one locally, and that's pretty good. But it's if it's all only the only thing that you do, well, your local utopia is not going to last. It's not going to hold. No, we need to build it by creating a network of people and who want to bring about change at a local level, and a network of territories and communities. It's also building that network that will make a big difference.
Hmm. I used to think the European Union was moving toward a shared approach to systemic risks. But now across Europe, there's a growing call for countries to step back to reclaim autonomy and independence. That shift might make sense to some, but it works against the need to build a common story for tackling systemic issues together. How do you see this tension between the need for collective action and the return of these national narratives?
I don't believe in the fact that countries have the biggest role to play in this. As I said, countries are governed by elected officials, and they do not have the means to bring about a societal systemic change. They can make big changes, right, but the system remains the same. Like after Brexit, many things changes for the worst for many people in the UK, but the system is still the same. We want economic growth. Okay, capitalism is still there. Exploitation of nature is still there. The this I would say that the link is broken between man and nature, and it's always the same. So the main problems of the equation are still there after Brexit, and so I'm not thinking. I don't think that countries are the way to do it. No, I believe communities, and you can have a network of communities that ignore boundaries and frontiers. You can have communities which are connected to each other, uh, even if there's a frontier between them. It doesn't matter.
Let me bring you back to the European Union for a moment, because you were pointing at to something important there. The question of its narrative.
European Union has a narrative. It has a vision. What is it? It's a market. It's almost only that. It's a commercial vision of the world. It's a market, and that's it. Wow, what a great civilization it is, isn't it? And that's it. There's not much more than that. There's not even a real actual common defense industry. Not even that. So we're just a market, and we've reduced life on Earth to this, to doing business. It's shameful. It's pathetic. Really, it is. It doesn't make us happier. It makes us worth. It's just a loss of meaning. Uh, it's brown out. People don't understand why they do what they do, and yeah, and that's it. And we are not happy with it. It makes us sad and pathetic. So we need something else than that, and that's, I believe that we won't be able to build it at the international level. I believe we need to build it at a local level, and then to connect territories so that the best ideas propagate through that network, and a vision emerges, but which has very many different variants. It's not just one uniform vision.
What role do you see culture and storytelling playing in our ability to face crisis together? And are there traditions and practices you feel we could learn from to strengthen that capacity?
Well, traditions, I don't know, but or practices, but they are people who have an actual culture of risk, a risk culture. We need a risk culture. We need a culture of responsibility, individual and collective responsibility, and responsibility towards that, to what? To ourselves, okay, to our loved ones, of course, to our community, okay, but to others as well, to other communities, because if you don't build that across communities, then you're going to find yourself against the others and not with the others when shit hits the fan. And you need to be, together. It's us with them instead of us against them. Otherwise, it's not going to work. I'm not saying that you need to be friends with everyone. I'm not saying that you need to collaborate with everyone. Doesn't make any sense. But for the important part, you need to be able to join hands and to fight together in a dignified manner with the people who are outside your community. Otherwise, yeah, otherwise it's not going to work. So yeah, it's about also a culture of yeah, working together with the people you don't know well or you don't like.
What you say echoes with this old logic of mutual aid. In mediation, I see the same thing, that security comes from reaching beyond your circle. And that leads directly to the mindset you talk about.
It's not about being on the left from a political point of view. It's about security of everyone, and people haven't understood that. It's part of the mindset that we need to develop. We in some countries they have a culture of risk. They have it, but very specific to certain type of risks. Now we need to develop that culture everywhere, and for one new type of risk, which is the mother of all risks, which is systemic risk, which is the risk of societal disruptions. By the way, when Nate Hagens talk about the Great Simplification, he may represent. He also talks about the carbon pulse. I don't know if he was the one to coin that term, but the carbon pulse. Basically, if you look at the amount of fossil fuels that are used, and therefore there's a strong correlation with the amount of energy that we have, and therefore a lot of correlation with what we can do, all the activities that we can have. If you look at that over time, over a long period of time, you will see that it's a curve that has peaked very quickly during the for less than 200 years, 150 something years since the Industrial Revolution, mid 19th century. So it's a peak, and we are at the top of the peak. Okay, so maybe some things will still grow in the near future, some things, but within 15 or 20 years, I believe pretty much all the dimensions of that curve will start going down. And it's not a crisis; it's the beginning of the downslope, and it's forever. Now we can ignore that. We can ignore that it's just a pulse, and then it's going to go down. It's going to go down forever. We can ignore that, and then it's going to be worse. Or we can prepare for that and try to find ways to deal with problems and to ensure our most basic needs without depending on fossil fuels, without depending on high technologies, without depending on supply chains and on the whole system, macro technical system, which we will not be able to maintain for generations and generations. So, for the important things, the most vital things, we need to be able to reorganize in a post carbon, post high tech, post growth mindset and paradigm. And if we don't do it, it's going to be much, much worse. If we do it, well, it's going to be hard, but we may find um, opportunities for happiness in that, because we will realize when this system collapses, after we've been through the rough patch, there's going to be rough patches, but after that, we may realize that it's not that bad, and we were junkies, and now we're now we were when you're a junkie, to go cold turkey, to stop everything is hard. It's really harsh. So we're going to go through that. It's going to be harsh, but there's hope to have, because after that part of the after that journey again, well, you're healthier and you're happier. The world will be simpler, will be more complicated for our lives maybe, but the whole world will be simpler. We'll have less options. It's going to be hard, I know, but we won't be able to do everything. So we're going to have to choose. And that's a blessing, because we are going to have to relearn what's really important. And that will give meaning to our lives. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm not trying to, to redraw it in pink artificially, but there's hope in that. Also, I want to say, because I know that I've talked a lot, I don't know how many questions you have left, but maybe you will stop a few, okay. But just in case you stop the interview too early to my taste, there's one thing I want to say. Our system, because people may infer from what I've already said, that there's no hope. They may infer that, and I don't want them to think like this. There's no hope that this system may become sustainable. There's no hope. Without systemic change, it's unsustainable, so it's not going to last. So we need systemic change. But I've just said before, I haven't developed it very much, but I've pretty much said that it's not going to be possible. We don't have the proper tools to make that systemic change. So people, they're left with this now. Okay, if we don't change the system, it's going to stop working and maybe collapse, but we can't change the system. So that's it. So it's pointless. And no. I want to say this. We need systemic change, and the opportunity for systemic change is precisely the moment it's going to break. It's that moment. So I'm not saying we wait and do nothing until it breaks. We have to prepare. We have, on one hand, to rely on all the people who tell you that they have solutions. It's not true. It's not going to solve the big problem. But anyway, yeah, it may make many things better. If we listen to them, we can adapt to a certain number of things, and we can mitigate a certain number of issues, and it's vital. So we need to do that. But also, we need to prepare for the fact that it's not going to be enough, and the system will break. So preparing for this, it's community resilience to make sure that when it breaks, we do not collapse. So we have the capacity to fulfill our basic needs in as many places as possible, networked. put together. We need to provide the basics without depending on a system which has just collapsed. That's the first thing. But it's not the end game. It's just a means to go further. Then you need also to work on all the different ways you can reorganize and rethink how we live together, how we make decisions together, how we move around, how we live and inhabit the territories, etc. So we have many options there already exist. Some which have been proposed by thinkers, which may be experimented also. But we have all the different seeds to lay the foundations of a new system. So first, there's this resilience to be able to to resist and not collapse when the general system will collapse or will stop working at least. Then we have the foundations, and the last thing is how do we organize now to make sure that tomorrow, when the thing will stop working, instead of pure chaos and insecurity everywhere and maybe war, not traditional war because traditional war needs a lot of energy and we won't have that much. But anyway, when it happens, that we have the capacity to be heard in the chaos, to be heard to say, hey, people, just stop panicking, because for the most important stuff we already know how to do and we've already done it. Resilience and other ways to live together. Look, here we've done this, there they've done that. Take a look while the internet still works. Here's a link to a video. You'll see it's very inspiring and it's pragmatic. So we need to, at that time, maybe we have a chance that all the people who did not want to hear about that, did not want to hear about those alternatives, it's not their thing. So they remained in the system. But when the system will break, we'll give ourselves a chance that most people would choose those options that you've tested and proved that they were coherent and you've put into inspiring stories. Maybe those things will be better. They will choose that instead of chaos. And you have your systemic change, the one you were waiting for. It's there. It's now up to you to direct, to choose the direction of change. You won't master everything, but you can I would say you can make sure that you're better organizing principles, better notions, and basic rules, mostly in the way we interact with nature and its resources. All that is has been tested and has proven to be more reliable in the case of disruption. That's going to be very powerful to convince many people to join you.
You keep coming back to this idea that stories matter because when the old system gives way, people need something coherent to turn to, something that feels more reliable than chaos. And that makes a lot of sense. But stories can prepare us and they can also blind us, especially now when so many of the stories we see are pushed by algorithms that set groups against each other. So let us stay with that for a moment. When you talk about resilience, do you mean coming back to what we had or moving towards something different? Some call it degrowth, others call it the great simplification. How do you see these pathways as retreats, as necessity, or as a way of imagining a different kind of flourishing?
Yeah, okay, a new type of prosperity maybe, but okay, those things are quite different, I would say. Like the great simplification, from what I understand, you'll have to ask Nate Higgins exactly what he puts in that term. Is a general dynamic. It's not something we choose. It's a general dynamic. It's going somehow to the world is going to be simpler because complexity, to maintain complexity requires a lot of energy and a lot of complex organizing, and we're not going to be able to maintain that for another 30 years. So yeah, its complexity will go down. So the world, it means that the world will be simplified. But it's a big dynamic. How this dynamic will translate effectively in different contexts for different people in different places, that I don't know. It's going to be very specific to each place. But so that's a dynamic that we don't control. We may adapt to it, but we don't control. Whereas degrowth is not something that we undergo. Degrowth is something that we choose. It's a strategy. Uh, Now, there are some degrowth thinkers or degrowth activists, but they're not powerful enough. It's never going to happen. Now,
So, is degrowth something that we choose, or is that something that is forced upon us because?
no. Precisely, precisely. It's important, and that's something which is almost never done. It's important to use the words correctly. What's going to be imposed upon us is economic contraction. The economy will contract, but it's not degrowth. It's not the same thing. Degrowth is a strategy. It's a project. Which, so okay, look. When people say, for example, something that I've heard a few times. Well, degrowth, that's crazy. It's just completely irresponsible. When you look at what happened during the pandemic, you see that degrowth has pushed tens of millions more people into extreme poverty in the world. It was not degrowth. There were no degrowth policy in the world at that time, anywhere. No, what happened is that the economy contracted. It's a recession. It's not degrowth, it's a recession. And maybe in some places, a depression. It's what happened within a system of growth, which can only grow, otherwise, it collapses. That's what happened. Otherwise, it degrades, let's say it degrades. And then eventually, if it lasts, it may collapse. So that's what happened. And degrowth is very specific. Degrowth is not the same system, but the economy is smaller. No, it's not the same thing. That's contraction. That's recession. Now, degrowth has a very specific meaning. It's changing profoundly the economic and the social systems, so that we may organize an energy and material descent, which will be forced upon us anyway. So we may just wait for it to happen, and then we will just we'll just have to make do, and it's going to be terrible. It's going to be chaotic. Or we may start to organize it beforehand, and we have a chance then that the contraction of the economy does not translate into human and social mayhem and havoc. That's the idea. And then it's about redistribution. It's about taking care of the most vulnerable so that they don't collapse, and to maintain the possibility of peace within the system, etc., etc. So it's not just the economy contracting. That's not degrowth, and that's a mistake that's been made many times. I hear very eminent thinkers saying, "Well, degrowth is unavoidable anyway." No, it's not. Recession is unavoidable. The contraction of the economy is unavoidable. Degrowth is, once again, it's a policy, it's a project. It's not unavoidable, because we will probably never choose to opt for degrowth. Maybe some people will do it locally, but I don't see any government, any state deciding that they will put together, they will implement an actual degrowth policy for their country. It's not going to happen. So degrowth is not unavoidable. Okay, it's contraction.
Okay, so recession is imposed by forces beyond our control, while degrowth should be a chosen redesign. In effect, how would their impact be felt differently?
As I said, we have enough means, resources. Still, we won't have that much in a few generations, but we have still enough, and enough money to make sure that people become more resilient in the face of societal disruptions, and to make sure that we can live better with less.
So, for degrowth to matter,
And
what would a country need to do in
no, if you
concrete
no,
terms?
I'm not a degrowth advocate, because, as I told you before, I believe that degrowth is very important. It's very interesting. We should go into degrowth. We should have already gone into degrowth on a planetary level, meaning that some countries still need to grow under certain conditions, and but others need to degrow. And in a country like Switzerland or France, it's not that it's possible to live better with less. Is that if you want to live better, you have to live with less. What I mean by that is that you are more likely to be happy in your life if you do not have all these choices, all these options. If you do not have 124 different types of yogurt when you go shopping, and 72 different tastes of crisps and chips, you will be happier if you don't have all that. We have so much so many options, so many things we can do. So we do, and we read, we have content. Okay, we have access to information. The more information you have, the less knowledge you have, because you don't take time to learn. The more things you can do, the less things you can accomplish. And you spend your life doing many things, but small things, superficial things, and you do not realize yourself. You don't actually fulfill yourself. And so you're not happy. You cannot be happy. So countries like us need to degrow substantially, while others may grow under certain conditions. But overall, in absolute terms, it has to be an energy and material descent, and it's really possible to live better with much less. And that's what degrowth is about. And making sure then that the most vulnerable gets cared for by the system, so that they won't collapse when it gets bad. Now, if you want to go further into it, as I said, I'm not a degrowth thinker, or I'm not a degrowth activist, or I can't remember the word I used earlier. Uh, Degrowth advocate. Thank you, because I don't think it will ever happen. It will ever happen. So yes, the degrowth thinkers are pretty much right, but it's not going to happen. So my stance is, what do you do to what do we do to anticipate upon the fact that our society will collapse? Well, not to collapse, but will stop working, and there's going to be disruptions.
Okay, so you made it clear that you're not advocating for degrowth. So let me turn to resilience. Mutual aid shapes how I understand it, since resilience is something communities build together, not alone. What I would like to explore is resilience in the face of systemic risks. Where have you seen that emerge, and what lessons stay with you?
Yeah, but that's the thing. Thank you for saying that. You say in the face of systemic risk, and that's the thing. It almost doesn't exist. I say almost because there are a couple of exceptions I'm going to talk about. But resilience, you say it's not a matter of people, individuals. It's collective. Well, it depends, because there are many meaning to that word. There are many instances of that word, and depends on who uses the term and in which context. So psychological resilience of an individual does exist. Okay. So when we say resilience, the question to ask is, resilience of what, in the face of what type of disruption, of shock, of risk? That's the question. For example, I've worked years ago with people who are specialists who are specializing in the resilience of infrastructure, resilience to cyber risks. It's very specific. It's infrastructure and cyber risks. Now, what are we talking about here? What I'm talking about is the resilience of social ecological systems. I would say communities and territories, and ultimately all that in within a network. So the resilience of that network. But when people hear about resilient communities, for example, it's very much there's still a very big problem in that most of the times. Most of the times it's anthropocentric. It's just the people that matters. And people say very often, because they're fed up of the economy and trade and money, they say we have to put people back at the center, at the core of what we do. No, it's not true. It's not true. It's true that it's more important than money, uh, overall, I mean, as a value. But people at the center, it's also part of the problem that people at the center, no, people are within and interact with nature. So it's about understanding that our societies and communities are social ecological systems. We interact dynamically with ecosystems, with a climate, with biogeochemical cycles, the cycle of water, the cycle of oxygen, the cycle of carbon, the cycle of nitrogen, the cycle of phosphorus, and all that is important in itself, and all that depends on biodiversity. It's physical and biological and ecological systems, all that. So I answered the first part of the question: resilience of what? Well, resilience of communities and territories as social ecological systems. The second part of the question is, in the face of what kind of risk? And if you say it, and you did say it, in the face of systemic risk, in the way I understand it, meaning that it's risks that um, that invalidate our very model of civilization, which will not last. When you understand that, it's completely different to every kind of resilience you've heard about. Um, when people talk about resilience, what they do is, they become autonomists. They grow their own food and stuff, but most of the time, their growing of their food still depends on the system, on fertilizers or on petrol or gas or on other things that they can only have because the system keeps working. Now, some people here and there have developed and mastered skills and knowledge that make them capable of producing sufficiently in a very bioproductive manner what they need, their food and maybe water and maybe a few other things, uh, in a sustainable manner and in a resilient manner. Resilient meaning not dependent on that system, which may not be there anymore in 20, 20, 30 years. And that's what it's all about. And I don't know many people that actually do that and are able to do that. They are so there are people and communities which have started a dynamic, and that's what it's about also in the short and medium term. It's about putting together, organizing a dynamic towards a goal. It's not about solutions again. It's not about, and you have to work, of course, on food and water, and then on other issues. And what you have to ask yourself is it going to be enough to sustain, to enough to to meet our most basic needs if the system collapses? Try to imagine the worst. Maybe it's not going to happen, but imagine the worst. Well, are you still resilient in the face of that disruption, societal systemic disruption? And that's the question you should ask yourself. What I can say also is that I find there's a very good mindset or mind frame in the in Rob Hopkins's uh, network and dynamic that he's created with transition towns movement. I'm not saying that they have all the solutions. I'm not saying that most of the places that actually participate in this movement uh, are actually really resilient. But there's a dynamic, as I said, and there's also a state of mind which I find relevant to the challenges ahead. So yeah, that's maybe a good place to start to understand. Reading the manual, the resilience manual, it's Manuel de Résilience in French. I can't remember what the English title is, by Rob Hopkins. Um, yeah, there are many other books, but this one is one of the keys to understanding what we may do together.
You have given a lot of conferences over the last few years. When you meet people who try to prepare for disruption, when they tell you they are already resilient and share with you their survivalist experience and mindset, what do you tell them?
Good for you guys, and they're very proud to be more resilient. And I tell them, you're not more resilient. You are less resilient than the rest of society. And they don't understand that. Sometimes I meet also survivalists people, and they think they're better off. Say, no, you're worse. Okay, why? They don't understand it. They usually they don't like it when I say that. And I tell them, you are more resilient until it stops working. Now, if the whole society keeps working fine, then okay, you're less dependent on the system than other people. So when there are crises, you are more resilient to those crises. But when they will be systemic disruption, well, then everyone will come to your knocking on your door, and you will be the first to fall. Because resilience, systemic resilience, is only possible at the territorial level, and it's only possible within close networks of allies who will help each other, as Kropotkin said, will help each other in the face of disruption. And those allies, you need to make sure that they're as many as possible, meaning that it's not just you and your friends and your community, it's other people, other communities, people who are different than you. If you don't build that across communities and across territories, then you are doomed when the collapse happens. So yeah.
I looked it up. Um, and the English title is The Transition Handbook, From
Oh, that's the one.
Oil
That's the one.
Dependency to Local Resilience.
Okay, and it's not by chance that Rob Hopkins started with permaculture. Permaculture is a good uh, tool set. It's a good toolbox. It doesn't answer all the questions, all the big challenges, but still, it's a good toolbox. Not just tools, but also about how you see the world, how you see yourself in the world, how you can reorganize your world and your life. And it's a philosophy also, to some extent, and it's very powerful and useful for tomorrow's challenges.
When systems fail or transform, people often turn to beliefs and traditions they inherited to make
True.
sense of uncertainty. And it seems clear that Judeo Christian cultures and Buddhist cultures draw on very different ways of approaching that search for meaning. Mm, in your work on
True.
resilience, how have you seen those different meaning frameworks shape, shape our ability to adapt and perhaps even the ethics we rely on?
Human people are people of they have a cultural dimension, a social dimension, and also a spiritual dimension. I myself, I must say, I'm not a very spiritual person. Maybe I'm a little more down to earth. And I'm not saying this to boast. I don't think there is anything to boast about here. I'm just saying it. So all the spiritual side of things, I'm not the best one to talk about it, but I recognize that it's important for many people and it has a role to play. But all so as important as it is, it has its drawbacks. It has its issues, its own issues. To come together, I would say that people need to have a common ground of beliefs and maybe vision and maybe values, and that all is stronger if they share a common storytelling, a common narrative, and maybe it may take the form of a religion or a cult or some sort. So that's why as you said, when disruption occurs, people are lost, and when they're lost, they're vulnerable. So there's a good and a bad thing. The good thing is that they will need meaning. So it's important to provide them with a vision, with an alternative, with another project for a society, and with meaning. It's important. It will change everything. But the bad thing is that also these people will be vulnerable to bad ideas, vulnerable to the people who will sell them, promise them without the intent or the capability to hold their promise, will sell them hope and or
Mm.
fake meaning, or false hopes.
And meaning can turn very quickly depending on the story people choose to hold on to. Some stories open possibilities, others close them.
Be careful, because if the stories that you told are in the form of us against them, or by the way, humans against nature, it's not going to work. It's going to collapse because it's flawed in its very DNA. Oh, by the way, today we live in a system, and the system as it is unsustainable and drives us into the abyss. The abyss. That's what's happening. So we need to stop that system. But it's not because that system is bad in itself and unsustainable that all alternatives are better. Now today you have people who pretend to be or present themselves are people who are anti-system. They want to bring the system down. Look at Trump, for example, and the MAGA movement. They want to bring the system down. Okay, why not? But what's the alternative you're proposing? Oh, wait a minute, it's much worse. It's worse from a human point of view, from an ethical point of view, and it's worse overall because you do not understand the issues, because you turn your back on science, because it's not about stop, exploiting nature less. It's about exploiting nature more. But nature is already collapsing. Biodiversity is officially collapsing.
I think I understand. When people reject a system without understanding what comes after, the risks will multiply. And that connects directly to the stories we use to make sense of change. I would like to explore that ethical dimension, if you don't mind.
All right.
If collapse or simplification are part of the horizon, then our response is not only technical, it is moral. What we protect, what we sacrifice, and who bears the cost become ethical questions. In your work on collective resilience, how should we think about responsibility when the burdens of disruptions are shared so unevenly?
Right. Okay. Thank you for this. Just a quick remark about the existing narratives and stories, and the science fiction especially. Um, it has put us into a wrong mindset, because most stories, fictional stories, they want to be effective. So there has to be big stakes, and there has to be conflict. Story, a good story, is conflict. There's no good story without conflict. Now, there are three types of conflicts: conflicts between people, conflicts between people and the world, and conflicts within individuals, inner conflicts. And those are three types of conflicts. And you have no good story without a good conflict. So stories, the way they've been told and propagated, they really emphasize conflict all the time in all its forms, and instead of emphasizing on how we work together, and because that makes a good life. That doesn't make a good story most of the times. So that's one of the things I wanted to say first. Then, as you said, solutions are not just technical. And when I say technical, it's not technological. For example, for me, a tax, a tax is a technical measure, or maybe a new rule, maybe a new set of rules, a new law. Most of the times, it's technical. Now, it may have other implications, even behavioral implications, but it's a technical tool. When journalists, when media invite people to talk about their expertise, a scientist, for example, I don't know. Let's imagine a scientist who specialized in ice, a glaciologist. I don't know how you pronounce this word in English. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I also struggle with pronunciation sometimes.
Yeah. So anyway, people who specialize in ice, great, important stuff. When you ask that person, as a journalist, when you ask that person to explain what they do and what they understand, and they can share their knowledge to some extent, and it's good. Now, when the person says, when the journalist says, so what are the solutions? And when that person starts answering the question, it's out of their hands, it's out of their field. Now, the solutions for ice are necessarily societal. It's the same. I'm talking about ice, but I could have talked about anything else. They're societal, and societal solutions. They're political, they're economical, financial, they're behavioral. So therefore, they're cultural. They're many, many, many folds. Also, if we talk about climate and other problems which are of a planetary scale, they're geostrategic, they're diplomatic, they're you have to bring in some other tool sets such as game theory and etc. And it's so complicated that no one has the answers. No one can say that's a solution. So when you say there are solutions, very often you're out of your field, whatever your field is, and you start talking about things which you do not master. The question itself should not be asked, and at least not in this way.
So, when systemic risks unfold, whether climate, financial, or social, those with the least protection tend to suffer first. And in your work on collective resilience, you emphasize that this is not only a technical issue, it is an ethical one. I would like to hear you on that.
So so as I said, you cannot, solutions are many fold. They're multidimensional, and one of those dimensions, I believe, should be ethics. Some say morals. It's not exactly the same thing, but let's say ethics. The problem is that ethics are not universal, and it's difficult to share that with other people. Very difficult. And when you start talking about it, telling people about values, very often they think you're obnoxious. Very often they don't appreciate that, being given lessons about values. They Maybe you're not trying to give lessons, but that's how many people will feel it, sense it. Yeah, your values are better than my values? Is that what you're saying? But they're not going to take it well. It's a matter of identity. It kind of puts them uh, on the on the it kind of questions themselves, and people don't like that. So I believe the talk about values is very important uh, among the people who think about the future and who think about alternatives. They need to have an axiologic thinking, meaning that they need to talk about the underlying values and principles that are very important. But I would say it has to remain invisible for the others. Values and ethics have to be concretely applied. It has to materialize throughout a systems or a way of a system of a society to organize through lifestyles, through the topics and the themes that you bring at the front that you think are most important. Through that, values are expressed, but without ever saying them. And I believe it's better to do it this way, to embody them instead of talking about it to everyone. It's like a house. You need to talk about architecture. You need to know a lot of things, equations about how you make sure that your house will stand. It's a lot of knowledge. But then in the end, people who come and visit your house, they don't need to know about all this. All they see is the paint on the walls, and that's enough for them. And it's how your house is organized, so that's and how your lifestyle is within this house, how you organize your everyday life. That's what matters.
I once explored with a sociologist how behavior changes only take hold when the surrounding
Mm,
conditions support them.
mm.
As individuals, we can act, but it is easy to feel powerless when the wider systems does not move. How do you see the balance between individual action and the changes that must happen at the systemic level?
Oh, at the systemic level, as I said, you need to come up with a new system. It's not a regression. You don't go back in time to older times but it's something new. It's something new with elements of today's society that you will keep, and of knowledge that you will keep, but also elements from the past which have become relevant again, which you may you may use, and it's new things as well, new things that will need to be created. So it's a mixture. But I understand. So from a systemic level, you need to change everything. Now, people can't do that. People, what they can do is that they can work on alternatives and demonstrate that it works, and make sure that it's known and it's inspiring through stories, and through communities and through networks, and share that information so that as many people as possible know about it. Most people will not go for it. They'll say, all right, yeah. Sometimes they will say, ah, it's nice, but they won't go for it. And sometimes they say, ah, bullshit. Or they will, come up with caricatures. Yeah, but those people are. So most people won't go for it. But if they know about it, then when shit hits the fan, when the bad things happen, if they hear that those people, oh yeah, I remember those people. I remember the stories, and the videos that I saw, the video that I saw of them. Well, maybe now it's not that bad. At the time, they were not interested, but now that the things are going really bad, if they realize that those people, well, they pull through better. Their way of life is, well, they're better prepared. They're more resilient. Then maybe that's going to be enough to convince them this time.
Okay, I think that's
Uh,
clear. These examples can plant seeds, but they cannot change the structures above us. And okay, that is where I want to go next. Even when communities act locally, they still depend on political structures that can block or reverse long term decisions. And in many countries, we see leaders who dismiss science or ignore shared institutions. What does that tell us about accountability? And how should we think about these solutions when they can be stopped at the highest level?
People who think they have solutions, they tell you this is what we should do. For example, to produce energy differently and emit less um, GHGs. They tell you about solutions, but what does it mean if the solutions cannot be applied at the right pace at the right scale and during generations. And as you can see, the world is not going simpler, and it's getting more difficult for many people. So things are changing, and you have populists and you have right wing extremists rising pretty much everywhere, and most of them do not care about science. So the decisions they will take, for example, stopping windmill farms, the decisions they will take are going to make things even worse. It's going to accelerate in the wrong direction, and the solutions that we were sold as such are not going to work in the long run. Even if they do work in the short run, they may be stopped further along the way and down the road by some state official which just doesn't believe in science, whatever. So the very conditions for our solutions to actually solve anything, solve the problems they're dealing with, are getting slimmer and slimmer, because you have people like Trump and Putin and Putin and not Putin, Putin and other chief of states who are openly climate denialists. What would be another institution or another organization or instance which would be more effective at carrying the change that we need? I don't have an answer to that. I don't think there is an answer to that. I think, and once again, my main message is not how do we change the world, is how do we prepare to the fact that we can't do anything to stop this problem from collapsing upon itself, because it's unsustainable and we can't change it. Now, we can, as I said, mitigate the problems, limit the problems, and we have to do it. It's very important to do it. So I'm not saying that all the solutions that were presented should not be implemented. They must be implemented if they're implemented properly, if the trade-offs are correct. They must be implemented. But let's stop calling them solutions, because all they will do is give us a little more time to organize something else and protect nature a little bit longer, so that when the tipping point, the societal, maybe civilizational tipping point occurs, then we still have resources to bounce and not just collapse. The system will collapse, but not all communities will. We can live, I would say, sustainably and resiliently if we organize beforehand, and that, I would say, has to be organized at a local level, and again within a network.
There is something else this raises for me. If simplification is ahead, then sooner or later we have to ask what we owe to the future. And that comes down to something very basic, almost ancient. What do we mean by a good life when we know we may have to live with less?
Good question, and it's all that. I mean, it really is all that. Um, but the thing is that most people don't and won't ask themselves those very important questions. Even a question as simple as what is a good life? What is the good life? It has many different meanings, but the original meaning, I would say, the Aristotelian meaning of it has been long forgotten by most people. It living good, the good life is not having a super yacht in Dubai. That's not what it's about. It's about living well and being able to look at yourself in the mirror when you're old and telling yourself, I did good. I was as good as I could be. I tried. And being able to look at your children, if you have any, and proudly, and so that's, they look up to you and not down. And that's all. It's a philosophical way of seeing life, and obviously philosophy is not something which is very important in our superficial consumption based system. It's even considered as something a bit silly, isn't it? Like wisdom is considered to be silly, and all these people who think this way now, maybe they'll regret it. They'll understand later. They say, "Oh, I was the silly one." But that's the thing. All the questions we should be asking, which you've just asked very well, are not on the menu today. Um, our responsibility to the future, just that. I mean, really, who actually thinks about it? Even people who think they think about it. For example, they have children and they want the best for the children. It's a way of thinking about the future, but they don't do what's best for them. They don't change the system. They don't change their lifestyle. They don't put themselves in question, and they feed their own children with fake hopes and values which may have its sense in this system, but which will be nonsensical in the next one when this system breaks. So yeah, there's no real anticipation of what the future is. Therefore, we don't understand the future, what it can be, what it can't. It's not about seeing exactly what's going to happen, but nobody can. But there are many things that we know won't happen, and the continuation of our system and the promises that are made by the ones who govern the system, well, those are false promises. They may be unintentionally false, by the way, but they are false. System will not continue this way. So anyway, we do not understand the future and where we are going. How do you want to ask the right questions about our responsibility to that future we don't understand? I believe we have a responsibility to other people and other beings and nature in itself and ourselves. We are accountable to ourselves. And also, you think you say, is it about preserving what we can? Or you said something about living with less. It's all that. But if you say to people living with less, that's not sexy, right? They don't want to live with less. First, because they don't understand that it's a condition of living better, living in our countries. Maybe not in Burundi. I'm talking about Switzerland and France, and I believe most countries where most people live who will, I hope, listen to this interview. We live in countries where we need less to be more happy, to be happier. Anyway, so we need to, of course, we need to renounce many things. And people believe that if they're renounced, it's going to be less. It's going to be less good. It's not going to be less good. It's going to be less material, less energy, less shit, less gadget, less stuff. But it may be better. So we need to rethink of this. And again, it's a matter of culture. It's a matter of storytelling. It's a matter of imagining life differently, re-questioning life. Who does that? Almost no one. And that's the problem. And then preserving what we can. Yeah, we are there. It's that's the thing. People say, it's too late. Too late for what? For some things, yes. Unfortunately, we've already lost things that we are not going to be able to find again. Disappeared species, most of them won't live again.
Yeah, it is true. And hearing you say it brings weight to the moment. Some things are gone for good, yet we still have choices. And since our time is running short, I would like to end on that question of possibility. By the way, we might even be heard in Burundi since I have a friend there. Hi, Zai. Hope to visit soon. As we come to the end of our conversation, amid all the systemic risks you describe, what is it that gives you hope?
It's not, the future does not need, as I said earlier, does not need 1,000 new projects separated from each other. It needs one alternative. Those projects need to come together and to knit a network. That's what we need. But also, we there's another dimension to it. We don't just need projects, new projects, alternatives on top of this system or next to this system. Okay, good. Maybe we have great alternatives and great projects, but we need to also work against some parts of the system which are really destructive.
Okay, let me pause here briefly because what you describe is more than resilience. It is also a form of resistance, especially in sectors where the incentives go against long term survival.
Most farmers are doing the best they can, but also, productivism is everywhere, and the industry behind it is just destroying. They say they want to nourish, they want to feed the world, but in reality, they just want to do it in a way that maximizes their revenue in the short term, and um, that jeopardizes our capability to feed the world tomorrow. So, and of course, the fossil fuel industries and stuff. So we have to be resistant, not just resilient. It's about all that, and I see people already do it. They have the knowledge. They have, well, maybe not everything, but enough. It's not enough. They have the courage and the means. You need to have the means. And when I say the means, not necessarily money, but at least you need to have time. Not people have time. Where I'm, where I have hope is that I see that things are happening, people doing things. Now, this hope is useless unless we come together, as I said before. It's about creating a network and a global dynamic and a societal alternative for tomorrow. Not just 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000 great projects which are separated and isolated. We don't need that. So, and people need to adopt a stance, a posture, which is very specific. Their project, your project, must not be just your project. Your project is a project for the world. It has the potential to save the world, nothing less. And it will only work if your project is known. What good is it if you have a great project that works well, but nobody knows about it? So you need to become agent of a cultural transformation. You need to, what you do, you need to make sure that it is known and it is inspiring, and it works, and you can prove it. So you need KPIs, indicators, to prove that you've changed things objectively. You need um, analyses of what you've done and what's worked and what didn't work, and you share this knowledge so that you fuel some collective intelligence, collective thinking, so that the same mistakes are not made everywhere. You need testimonies of the people who are in the project or around the project, and you see, and you try to understand how they feel, why, for example, they take part in the project, if they're optimistic for the future or pessimistic for the future. And the important thing is to ask the same questions to the same people every year or so. And what's important is how the answers evolve over time. Now, if the people who at first they come to the project or they're impacted by the project locally, if they answer, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future, about the capacity of the people around you to come together when it's if a crisis, a strong crisis, happens tomorrow. If the people say they're pessimistic about that, but then 3 or 4 years later, most of them say they're optimistic about that, because you've created something in that particular place which makes them more optimistic. That's very important to be able to 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 underline it, to highlight it. And then the fourth thing that you need is pictures of people and places, after, before and after. And and when you have all that, you keep it on in a hard drive. When you have all that, you can, after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on your project, you can tell the story. You've kept all the information, the images, the testimonies, and the KPIs. You've kept all the history of what happened since the beginning of the project. You can put it into a story. If you don't know how to do it properly, call for the help of someone who knows about storytelling and who will do it well. If you don't know how to make beautiful things, also work with people who know how to do this, because a great project is good, but same great project, if it's beautiful, if the place is beautiful, if the transformation is beautiful, that's going to change the world. It's going to be much more powerful. And when you have all that, you have a great story to tell. It's going to propagate if it's good. And yeah, the little seed is going to be planted into many, many people's spirits. And tomorrow it's going to change the world when the right time arises.
In getting ready for today, I listened again to several of your talks, and one example stayed with me. It is your point about copper. The metal is not the real bottleneck. You said the bottleneck is the water required
Yeah.
to extract it. That simple link captures the whole logic of systemic limits.
It's there will be limits to the availability of copper, but it's further away indeed. Before we hit that limit, we will hit a limit of water, and of course you can desalinate water using water plants, s- but it requires a lot of energy to operate these plants, and this energy, where does it come from? If it comes from coal or things like that, it's going to be even worse. So yeah, we will meet hurdles and limits and new constraints. The problem with the decarbonation of the world is that it requires a lot of minerals, ores, and a certain number of them are going to be more and more scarce in the future, more and more expensive probably. So I'm not sure how far we can go in this project that we have to decarbonize the world through technology.
Arthur, we began with your personal journey and we end with the larger journey we all share.
It's
We
true.
are navigating systems that may well collapse, and somehow we're circling back to imagination and ethics as living differently becomes harder to avoid. So, for the listeners, the real question may be not only how systems change, but how we change with them.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I always finish with the same question. After all we've talked about, what is the thing that we're not talking about, but we should be?
You need to understand that tackling the different problems separately is not going to solve the situation. Uh, and as I said before, you may try to solve the different symptoms, and if you don't heal the disease at the same time, it's not going to be enough. And it's not just about understanding that; it's about realizing that no one has understood it yet. Maybe tomorrow. It's not what the scientists do. I mean, I have the utmost respect for science, and I have the utmost respect for most scientists who do a good job, but a good job in their discipline. And the problem is that summing all the different solutions that have been created within the different disciplines, fields of expertise, again, is going to be able to mitigate the different symptoms, and that in itself, as I said, it is vital, but is not enough. It doesn't tackle the source, the origin, the systemic disease that materializes into these different symptoms. So yeah, you need to understand that nobody's understood it. You need to understand that it's important to work on all these things, but also to prepare for the fact that we do not have the right tools and strategies, and they exist theoretically. And systems thinking is a good tool to understand not what should be done, not what can be done, but what should be done. Sorry. With systems thinking, you know what kind of levers we should activate to actually change the system. But also, you realize that it's not going to happen. It's very unlikely. So we need to prepare for that. So that's the main things we should discuss. I think. And but that's pretty, that's a downer. So also we should discuss the fact that if we act, we create hope. Hope is active. You can create hope, and if you act in concordance with what I said, then you create lucid hopes. And if you act also with values somewhere inside, and in accordance to the values that you know are good, that's the key to happiness and fulfillment, not consumption. With all that in mind, you can change yourself, your life, and the world, perhaps.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you for your generosity, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Gabor. It was a pleasure.
Bye.